Welcome to CXWise, where we share wisdom, insights, stories, and expertise from the world of customer experience. I'm your host, Nathan Bennett, and you're about to hear real-world experiences and practical advice that will elevate your CX game no matter your title, no matter your industry, and no matter your passions. So, without further ado, let's get wise. My guest today is Scott Monty. He's a remarkable executive leadership coach and a true expert in the art of public speaking. Scott is the CEO and principal of Scott Monty Strategies and has been sought after by everybody from Walmart to IBM, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Google, just to name a few. He's a neoclassical strategist who advises corporate executives and boards on modernizing their culture to meet the changing needs of customers, but does it with the examples of history, literature, philosophy, and poetry, and that's why he is near and dear to my heart. The Economist ranked him as the #1 spot on their list of 25 social business leaders, and the former CEO of Ford Motor Company hailed him as a visionary. I have to agree. Scott, I hope we've embarrassed you enough. A warm welcome to CXWise. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Well, I sincerely appreciate that kind introduction. And even though this is audio, I hope people can hear me blushing.
Oh, yeah. I hope they can hear the tear in my eye, if not the garglingness in my throat. My apologies to our audience and to Scott. I'm dealing with the flu right now, but we're going to push ahead anyway. Scott, before we begin our questions specific to you, we like to level set with all of our guests by understanding what we're talking about from your perspective, specifically about customer experience. So how does Scott Monty define customer experience today?
Well, I think it's really about every time you touch or give a customer some sort of a feeling, whether it is in person, whether it is digitally, whether it is in writing, whether they use your brand in a particular setting. Every time you have an opportunity to have an interaction with a real human being in whatever medium, you are giving them a customer experience. David Ogilvy said this years ago. The customer isn't just anybody. The customer is your wife. Right, to really try and humanize that experience and help executives and their teams think about the actual individual on the other side of that transaction.
I love that. My one amendment to Ogilvy is I always think about my customer as my mom. I kind of thought, like, would this experience measure up to my mom's expectations?
I think this was one of the things that Ogilvy was getting to. You don't need to treat customers like they're stupid, but at the same time, you can't treat them like they are subject matter experts like your design or engineering team either.
Yeah.
And one of the most remarkable and inspiring leaders I've ever had the privilege to serve with, and you mentioned him in the intro, is Alan Mulally, CEO of Ford. Yeah. And he had this remarkable ability about him to simplify the most complex things, but to do it in a way that didn't make you feel like he was talking down to you. Yeah. And that is really something special.
Since you brought him up, I remember you telling a story about take your child to work day, but there were questions that he was fielding from the stage. Do you know where I'm headed with this?
Yeah, so it was indeed Take Your Child to Work Day. We were at this huge event that they held at a kind of a conference center on campus at Ford. And Alan was up there as the CEO. My sons, I think, were 7 and 10 at the time. And my 10-year-old's hand went up, along with all the other kids, when Alan asked if there were any questions from the audience. And he took a few. And Will didn't get his question answered, and that was fine. And then we go out of the auditorium afterwards and have lunch in the corporate cafeteria.
Oh, heck yeah.
Because they love the tater tots and hot dogs.
Hey, I'm with them. Right?
And just as we're coming out of the cafeteria into the lobby, I get a call from Amy. And Amy was Alan's executive assistant. And she said, "Scott, where are you?" I said, "I'm down here in the lobby." She said, "Come on upstairs to the 12th floor. Alan wants to see you." And we walk in to her area, and there's Alan standing in the doorway to his office with a big smile on his face. And he waves us in. He goes, "Come on in, boys." And he spent the next 15 minutes with us chatting with the boys and getting interested in what they were doing in school and what their hobbies were and asking about their mom. And he sat them down. He said, "You want to sit behind the desk?" And so the boys had a chance to sit in Alan's chair. And he brought a photographer in and took pictures of them sitting behind the desk. And then he signed a note for them on Ford letterhead and put a big heart around their names, and motioned Amy back in, and she brought in 2 tote bags filled with Ford branded merch, and sent them on their way. And as I thought about that, I mean, obviously, Alan made us all feel like $1 million when we were in his presence, but the presence of mind that he had to scan the audience, to see my kids, and to make a mental note to himself when he got back to the office, "Amy, call Scott. I want him to bring his sons up here." That was a remarkable show of leadership and empathy. And in this case, it's a human experience, whatever it is, whether it's employee, customer, etc. And that kind of feeling that you give to someone can then cascade throughout the organization and out to the customer as well. And here's the thing. I don't know if I'm the only one Alan did that to that day. There may well have been 5 other executives that he spotted in the audience, and he did the exact same thing to them. The point is, it doesn't matter, because it felt so personal and so genuine to me and to my kids. That's really what mattered.
He made you feel it was an authentic moment. And you've said, I believe, that the concept of authenticity is often perceived as something that can't be taught or trained, which I thought was interesting. I've heard the same things said about empathy. I was one time interviewing a supervisor of a contact center, and I was asking her what she looked for in her employees during her interview and hiring process. And she said, it's the thing that can't be taught, empathy. If I find that they're an empathetic person, I think they'll be really successful here. Everything else I can teach them, but the empathy I can't. They either have it or they don't. Do you feel like authenticity is that same thing?
You can't really teach empathy. Well, no, you can't. But at some point in our lives, someone, mostly parents, taught us about the importance of caring for the dignity of other people. And that's where empathy and authenticity come from. If you're taught at a young age, and if you're brought up with values and principles that make you think about other people other than yourself, and if you think of other people first, even better, right? But if you've grown up in a lifetime of not having had those values enforced, then when you do get to a workplace scenario and you don't have authenticity or you don't have empathy, then indeed it is very hard to teach.
These are 2 concepts that are uniquely human, authenticity, at least in the way that we're speaking about it, and empathy. And yet customer experience is being heavily influenced now by things that are not human. AI is certainly abundant, well, everywhere, but specifically innovations in AI are bringing to light new opportunities and new capabilities. And I'm wondering how it is, with all of the great technology that brands are empowered with now, how do we not lose that human touch of authenticity and empathy when we're using tools that are less than human?
Well, as much as I hate to use him as an example, I think Elon Musk is onto something with Grok, which is this X AI that's been created. And the thing that I like about it is its light and humor-filled tone. And I don't think you get that from a lot of AI. And what's going into every single AI that's been built or that's being built is human programming. None of these are happening by magic. I mean, they all have to be programmed. They all have algorithms, etc. They're all based on real world language that's already been spoken. So to be able to take an AI and make it less about just the facts, ma'am, and to give it an irreverent tone, or to give it a tone that's warm and comforting, or whatever your brand happens to represent, we have that ability. right? So rather than just going through the motions of the technology, why aren't we drilling down to what is the purpose of this? How do we want people to feel after they've had an interaction? Look, everybody at a certain point has heard a hold voiceover or read a press statement that says, "We regret any inconvenience you may have experienced." And okay, that's very official and it sounds okay, but does it really sound human? That's corporate speak, that's legalese, rather than, oh, hey, I'm sorry you're going through this. Let me see if I can do something to help make it better for you, which immediately softens the tone and brings it down. Anything you can do to de-escalate a situation when people are angry about something, or to let them know that you understand what they're going through, because that'll help them feel like you're caring about them, right? And the danger we have right now with AI is that caring aspect of our businesses can potentially get washed away because of the technology just taking the time to do things more efficiently rather than effective.
I love that, Scott, and it's about exactly what you said, how people leave feeling after the experience. I love that you mentioned humor in that. You were one of the funniest people we've had, certainly on the podcast. So you're the perfect person to ask this question. We've not asked it before, but what role does humor play in customer experience? Yes, it depends on what kind of brand voice they have and that's what sort of brand personality they have. But are we missing opportunities for humor in our day-to-day customer experience?
The concept of humor is unnecessarily complex. And the reason I say that is humor is a difficult emotion or a difficult platform to land on because everyone has a different sense of humor. There's some people that appreciate a certain type, other people that don't. There's some people that are completely humorless as well. Look, if someone wants to return a blender and is pissed off about it, it is not a life or death situation. If someone's software goes down on Black Friday, it's unfortunate, but it is not life or death. Right. And we need to understand that we can't take ourselves too seriously and that we need to treat other people in a way that makes them feel better about the situation, makes them feel better about you and handling their situation, and showing that you have a sense of humor, first and foremost, and particularly about yourself, will help humanize that experience for people.
No, I love that. There are times in which humor used correctly can diffuse a situation. Well, not everybody can do it well. And I think you alluded to the fact that, like, not everybody is funny, right? But there is an intrinsic human quality to that thing of shared laughter that softens us, that builds our relationships. And I wonder, even if, like, in a contact center script that is laid out for people to speak to when people call in with issues, if there was some more humor built into that. Not sure how successful that would be because it's about the delivery.
Well, look, I think we've seen that in some cases. I've taken flights on Southwest Airlines. Yep. And the flight attendants that have to give this FAA mandated spiel about the exits and the seat belts and the oxygen mask and all the rest. And I've heard some of them where they say, in the case of low cabin pressure, oxygen masks will drop from the ceiling. When you're done fighting off your fellow passengers, grab the oxygen mask. And, it's something like that takes the ordinary, the mundane, and infuses a little humor into it. The one thing I want to make sure I land on here is that having a sense of humor or being able to poke fun at yourself or knowing when to use humor appropriately indicates an extreme level of self-awareness. You need to be aware of a situation. You need to be able to read people. You need to be self-aware enough to be able to execute it. And with self-awareness comes emotional intelligence. And the leaders, the individuals, the brands that have emotional intelligence or that exhibit emotional intelligence are the ones that are treating other people like human beings, that are acknowledging our existence, that are using humor, that are being empathetic, I mean, what's not to love about that? And what is so wrong that you wouldn't aspire to integrate that into every experience that you can?
Scott, I wanted to ask you to give our listeners who don't know a little bit of background about your kind of pioneering work in social media at Ford.
I was approached in late 2007 by the chief communications officer of Ford Motor Company. Social media at the time was very limited. This was before companies even had Facebook pages. The medium of choice at the time was corporate blogs or even YouTube, but that was pretty much it. So they approached me and they said, look, we're establishing a new executive position to lead social media and digital communications globally for the company. I had the conversation with Ford and ultimately concluded that it wasn't for me. I didn't feel like uprooting my family from Boston and the timing wasn't right. Next year it comes around. They get into Q1 2008 earnings reporting and Ford posted a $100 million profit. I said, things are starting to turn around for this company. Maybe there's something there. So we got back in touch and I had like 8 interviews over the course of one day. And I walked away from there, not only feeling just awed by the company, but I also walked away feeling like, my gosh, there are so many talented and erudite and intelligent people here. And by July of 2008, I was working for Ford. Now, that sounds great, but 10 days after I started, the company filed its Q2 earnings, which was an $8.7 billion quarterly loss, the largest in the company's history. As people may remember, that was the start of the global carpocalypse. Now, because of Alan Mulally's leadership, Ford had the financial backing to be able to last through the crisis, but the others didn't. And we made it through that. However, Ford had a different story to tell. And instead of being lumped in as part of the big three that the U.S. automakers were always known as, we needed to tell our story differently. And for 6 straight months, with every type of media, and my beat was online. We went to digital hand-to-hand combat, as I say, where we told our story differently, and we backed it up with content, and we backed it up with real people. I was out there in the blog comments, in the forums, on Twitter, everywhere I could be, and dispersed my team to be, to tell Ford's story differently. And what it did, Nate, is along the way, it kind of backed up our strategy, which was to humanize Ford through social media. And we had a wonderful CEO who was very affable, and he was a great spokesperson for us. We had legions of great people inside the company whose minute stories we were starting to bring out and tell in more detail and how they contributed to the bigger picture. And then ultimately, we had Henry Ford and the Ford family themselves, who are so intricately involved with the early history and the present doings of Ford Motor Company that it is still a family-owned organization, right? So that humanizes it like no other. No one else can say that in the auto industry. So it was a unique position for us to stake. Our strategy was consistent with that, and it backed up everything that the business was doing. And over the course of my 6 years there, Ford became an example, not only in the auto industry, but to many corporate industries in how to do social media effectively at all levels.
Thanks so much for filling us in on your background. And I know there's so much more you could say about some of the campaigns that you ran. They were super innovative and creative, just like Alan said, visionary in a lot of ways. Do you think that the problem that you were facing in 2007, 2008 with Ford, if you were facing that same problem today, do you think you could have harnessed generative AI and still resulted in the same transparency and trust?
That's a really interesting question, Nate. So the Fiesta had launched or was launching a year before it would launch in the US. So in having that opportunity, we thought, well, why don't we bring 100 of those Fiestas over from Europe and give them to what we now call influencers for 6 months. And we went through a recruitment and audition process for 100 people all across the United States. So they had to be geographically dispersed. They had to be a diverse kind of people, because we realized that who do people trust? People like themselves. So we had to have a whole host of people that were from different backgrounds. They all had their own beat. Some of them had YouTube channels. Others were Flickr photographers back before Instagram was a thing. Some had blogs. And what we did is we required them to do one video a month for 6 months. That was the entire commitment. And we gave them a theme. So one month it was about sustainability. Another month it was technology and entertainment, on and on. But in the meantime, they did what creators do. They were out there driving their cars around, filming themselves, taking pictures of themselves, and quite frankly, driving the car around the country and showing it off to other people. What we did with all of their RSS feeds, whether it was their Twitter account or their YouTube, we amalgamated it on a single site on fiestamovement.com in real time. Ford did not touch that content one bit. And to your point, Nate, what that showed was our level of comfort with the technology, our trust in other people to tell our story, and it gave us the ability to mine the comments and the feedback for improvements to the product, which was unheard of before. And as a result, we changed a seatbelt configuration, a cup holder location or size. It was remarkable. Now, fast forward to today. I think the relationship with influencers is a little more touchy, a little more fraught, a lot more commercial. When it comes to AI and content in particular, you run the risk of people not believing what is out there because they don't know whether it is genuine or whether it is manufactured, right? And that is a huge risk to brands right now. My counsel to companies now is do what you can to increase opportunities to physically interact with people in their space, in your city, wherever it may be, to create events, to create opportunities to connect human to human, and maybe it could be a phone call. There were instances where I had Alan actually call customers up. And then they wrote a blog post about it, which gave us more exposure and boosted our reputation. Right? There's all kinds of ways to go anti-AI. It doesn't mean you're eschewing AI entirely. You can still use AI for what you need it for. But in these moments, when you want to affect people, when you want to treat someone, like I said, with dignity and respect and to acknowledge their humanity, that's going to go a lot farther than a flawlessly AI-driven chatbot experience.
One of the things I said in your introduction was that you're a neoclassical strategist. I'm fascinated how someone who refers to themselves as a neoclassical strategist, using examples from history and literature and philosophy and poetry, how do you use those things to influence today's brands and organizations?
Over the course of recorded history, human nature has not changed. We still are motivated by the same things. Now, the world around us has changed. The technology is certainly vastly different. But fundamentally, what drives human beings, things like the 7 vices, greed, lust, jealousy, and all of these emotions, they still drive us. But guess what? So do the 7 Beatitudes, right? The point is, if you can understand how these have played out in the past, you'll give yourself not a roadmap, but at least a compass for the future, right? And if we are not all wandering lost in the future of AI and wondering, where is this going to go? Will we survive? Well, we've got plenty of examples of how humans have treated each other in the past and how we've avoided certain things. Why go out and create your own mistakes and have to recover from those when you can see the mistakes other people have made?
Yeah.
And then avoid those. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think for marketers and content creators, there's much to be learned from the structure of these pieces of literature all throughout history. And you find that the structure is often the same. You find that the plots are often the same. And we can bring that knowledge and expertise from those works into how we speak about what we do today.
Yeah, and if we can tell stories about it, that's
Absolutely.
the easiest way for people to learn. We should be able to teach our customers about this kind of thing by being better storytellers.
Well, on that note, I'd like to end with a story from you. Can you tell us what comes to mind? Give us the story of the best customer experience you had.
I had an experience recently with a company I've been using for quite a while, American Stationery. I get my paper, my stationery from them. And I wanted this special size stationery that would allow me to type my letters, and I could customize it. And I just wanted my name across the top. So I put it in, I selected the font and the colors and all that, and I looked at the proof. Okay, looks good. Sent it in. About a week later, I get the stationery, and it was my two names jammed together.
Scott
Monty.
Monty.
It was like one name, Scott Monty, which is cool.
Yeah, right.
It flows off the tongue, but that's not what I was envisioning. So I got on to the chatbot with them, and there was a person on the other end. And the reason I know is because it took them a while to actually interact with me. And they told me, sorry, we'd be glad to do it over. That's what I wanted to hear. And they said, you don't have to send it back, but we'll give you a 50% discount on the replacement order, and you'll still have to pay postage. I said, no, I'm not paying for your mistake. I would expect you to send me a replacement for free. And the person was like, well, sorry, this is our policy. So I just let it sit there for another week because I was just so exasperated. I was clearly not getting anywhere with this person. So the next week, I used the 800 number, and I called them up. And I got this lovely woman, and she was empathetic. She was very disappointed to hear about it. She said, would you send me a screenshot or a scan of what it was supposed to look like and what it does look like? And I sent her the two things side by side, clear as day. And I was on hold for a while as I was trying to do that, and she was going through her records and all that. So it wasn't quick. But when she got the email and she opened it up and saw it, she goes, oh, no, this isn't right at all. I can see why you'd be upset. And she just had this sweet tone about her. And here I am waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for that 50%. You're going to have to pay for postage. And she said, oh, we'll get this sent out to you right away. And I said, well, do you need my credit card? She goes, why would I need that? This was our mistake. We're going to send this to you. I said, okay, well, do I need to send this other order back to you? She goes, oh, no, hang on to it. Use it as scrap paper for your kids or whatever. So the whole experience with them was completely de-escalated because of her understanding and her willingness to do the right thing. And so many times companies are hesitant to do the right thing by the customer because they then think that there is a legal requirement on their end, or there will be legal consequences that will then require them to do the same thing for everybody else. Wouldn't you do the right thing for everybody? I don't know. But the point is, when you do the right thing with the right person and with the right tone, then you'll have created a customer
the other
for
guy?
life.
You know, the first guy that you had.
No idea. It could have been an intern. It could have been somebody who was brand new on the job.
It really comes down to, I think, the empowerment to do the right thing is key. You know, someone hadn't given this other guy, or for some reason he didn't feel empowered to do the right thing. So he just fell behind well, this is our policy. There's nothing I can do about it.
That's right. And that's a cultural thing. A long time ago, I went down to Walt Disney World, and I had a meeting with the social media team down there. And they were struggling with their legal experts that wouldn't allow them to do things online, to respond to people on Twitter, etc. And yet, what they indicated, and they brought this up to the legal team, and they said, in the park, kids walking down Main Street with an ice cream cone they just got, and the ice cream cone falls on the ground. Any Disney cast member is authorized to give that kid a slip that says, hey, go into the ice cream parlor and get yourself a replacement cone, free of charge. Right? And it doesn't matter if it's the janitor or the fireman that greets you as you're taking pictures there on Main Street or whoever it is. Every employee is authorized to improve the customer experience. And if we can all take on that kind of thinking and build a culture where everyone has the responsibility for making the customer satisfied, then the customer experience world would be a better
Scott,
place.
I can't think of a better place to drop the mic, as it were. Perfect way to close it out. I can't tell you what a joy it's been to meet you, to talk to you, to go through your work. Your career has been nothing less than visionary, Scott. So thank you so much for making us all CX wiser. We really appreciate your time.